Once again, the Minding Your Business podcast is brought to you by the Binge podcast network, the Binge on a binge.com. Check out all the exclusive content from many of the great podcasters. The Startup Life podcast with Dominic Lawson. Congratulations to him for securing a great opportunity with Target, which is one of the largest retailers, as you know, here in the country. He was able to secure that for an advertising opportunity with the Startup Life. So make sure you check out the Startup Life podcast. Check out Let's Be Real, Just Blurtin', Nothing But Buckets. Many of the podcasts, quarterly, there at onabinge.com. As always, Brooks Brothers Consulting, retail banking and business consulting, help you level up your financial institution, whether it's sales, service, operations, or employee engagement. Go to brooksbrothersconsulting.com. We're here, episode 107. What do we do?
What we do here is go back.
Yes, again, I am your host, Champ Ron. This is the Minding Your Business podcast, coming to you on a Friday, the first Friday here in September, Friday, September 6, 2019. There's a ton going on. What's going on, Cuzzo? Lisa, how you doing? Tamika Herb, Makita's Cookies, coming up on their 20th anniversary. Shout out to you. And thank you so much for joining. Thank you to everybody that's on Spreaker.com. And listen, we don't want to waste any time today because I got a very special guest that I want to introduce. His name is Chris Wallace. He's the co-founder and president of InnerView, which is a marketing consulting firm that helps companies effectively, tie in on that, effectively transfer their brand strategy to customer-facing employees and partners. And he's joining us all the way from Pennsylvania. And we really want to learn and get some great nuggets from him, community. So make sure that you're taking notes and make sure that you're ready to make it happen. Derek Watson, what's going on, man? How you doing? Thank you for that information earlier. So without any further ado, I want to bring in Chris Wallace. Chris, are you there?
I am here, Ron. How are you?
I'm doing phenomenal, my friend. How you doing?
Good. Do you mind if I call you Champ? I prefer to call you Champ.
Yeah, that's what they call me. So, yeah, most definitely do that. Most definitely. So, Chris, I appreciate you taking time to join the show. And, you're a busy guy, so we want to get right into it. So, talk to us a little bit about, how you got started in the business, where did InnerView come from, and, really what's the essence of what you guys do?
Yeah, so like a lot of people, I'm sort of an accidental entrepreneur. I didn't roll out of bed one day and see the light and decide that I was going to start a business. It really happened through a bunch of circumstance. But I was in a corporate role, and was going to be displaced through a corporate merger. Was going to have to move to a place I didn't want to move to.
Oh, yeah.
And what ended up happening was I took basically a contract role, and as a one-man band, as an independent contractor for that same company, it ended up turning into them needing a lot more help with what we were doing. And essentially what we were doing and what we've been doing since is really helping organizations when they're bringing new things to market, when they're launching new products, new services, rebranding, anything that relates back to their brand and to their, really their go-to-market strategy, helping make sure that their frontline teams are prepared with the right messages, prepared with the right behaviors in front of customers, and really helping drive that brand experience down through every single time to the customer.
Gotcha. And so, Chris, as you're doing that, because that's very similar to what I do in terms of with financial institutions, whether it's banks or credit unions, is helping their frontline teams level up. And because I've got a lot of that background, right? And so, what kind of led you to kind of get to that piece of it? Because a lot of times marketing firms focus solely on the business itself, the overarching marketing strategy and helping to develop that. But I don't typically see a lot of organizations that help the actual executioners of that, right? The people that actually go out. Because it's one thing to have a strategy on paper or put it on your website, you know what I mean, all that type of thing. It's another thing to then go out and actually execute it and measure it and then come back and say what worked and what didn't work. So I find that intriguing that you guys do that.
Well, I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to give you a little anecdote that I think highlights why we're so passionate about this. I I have a 6-year-old son, and my 6-year-old son is happy to play any sport that has a stick or a ball or anything where he can be running around being a little boy. He's happy.
Right.
And he blew out a pair of sneakers. He blew out a pair of Nike sneakers after about 2 weeks. I mean, really, like, they just fell apart. And I took him back to the Nike store where we bought them. And the person behind the counter told me all the reasons why he couldn't help me. We don't do that at this store. Here's a number that you call. And I'm not trying to blow up Nike. It's just an example.
Right.
But what I found was, in that interaction, I'm thinking about the Nike brand. And everybody knows what the Nike brand is. Just do it.
Right.
And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, looking at this young man, thinking to myself, your brand is just do it. And here you are telling me all the obstacles between you and doing the right thing for your customer. And over the years in business, we have seen those types of examples time and time again. And companies that invest so much in their brand, through advertising, through digital marketing, through all sorts of different activations of their brand, yet that person who stands in front of the customer can be the difference between somebody loving that brand and hating that brand. And
Right.
we feel really passionate about the fact that you can advertise all you want, but if you can't deliver on the promises that you advertise, you're spending a lot of money really for nothing.
Right.
Customers show up and you can't back up your promises that are told in the ads. You're wasting a lot of money. So we're passionate about helping organizations sort of recover a lot of that revenue that's slipping through the cracks.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad you phrased it that way, Chris, because what I see even in banking, and then if you put on the hat of a consumer, right? You get an advertisement, there's an opportunity at whatever company, and then you go in. I mean, how many times have people said this, and how many times have you heard this, MYB, where you walk into a place of business and then the people don't even know what the hell's going on? They may not even know anything about the special that you bring up. So it's like you're more, I guess, in tune to what's going on than even the frontline people that are supposed to, again, execute on what's going on. And so I'm glad you put it that way, because that's very true. It comes down to companies have to be able to cascade down the information to all the way down to the part-time employee that's in the front lines with the customer, so that there's a synergy that exists between the information and that, as you said, Chris, you can execute on the deliverables that you're advertising. And how many companies miss on that? How many companies, when, I guess, Chris, as a question, when you come across a company that's a prospect of yours, right? Do you tend to find that that's such a major issue, or have they had maybe a blow up that's come as a result of maybe mismanaging marketing strategy and brand strategy being cascaded down?
So I'm going to say it's not typically a blow. We always talk about this as, this is like chronic pain. This is like that chronic shoulder or knee that's been hurting you for a long time.
Right.
You haven't done anything to address it. You just sort of learn to live with the pain. And
Yeah.
when we talk to marketers, the question that we ask is, how confident are you that the people talking to your customers can tell your brand story the way you created it? How confident are you? That's sort of our gut check question for the marketing team. And what we find is, typically, Rod, we get laughter. People laugh when we ask that question because they're not confident. They're not confident that the connection is there between their own people and the brand that they've built. They're so focused on reaching the customer that they forgot to reach the person who stands in between them and the customer. And we really feel like that question has sort of opened up the marketer's mind. And again, it goes back to what I said. It's not necessarily something where they say, oh, well, we had a huge problem the other day with this, or we ended up in the newspaper because we had a big customer experience problem. It really ends up being something where they're like, you know what, I have that problem and I'm just sick of dealing it, and it's such a drag on our results. So helping them see that not only is it something that is a pain for them, but something that we can address, and it's something that's not sort of an unsolvable problem, is something that we find a lot of marketers receptive to.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I'm thinking through this, even as, those of us that are on the phone that are business owners, or those of us that are working for companies that are listening to this podcast, that information becomes so critical. And, it's making my head spin a little bit, Chris, as to, when you come across a customer or as a prospect, do they tend to have any kind of quantitative data that suggests here's why we need to connect with InnerView, because we're losing every time we do one of these promotions, we're losing $5 million a quarter because we're having to do all these refunds, or we're having to put things on back order, or we're having it, whatever it is. Do you find that they come with measurable results like that, or is it just kind of a gut feeling that they have where they say, I think we can do a little better, and InnerView can help us do that?
That's a fantastic question. I think it's a mix of both, to be honest with you. I think every organization can trace back and say, we really think we could be converting better. And when we think about the metrics that we want to be measured by, and the metrics that we're going to track, it really does come back to conversion. When you have the opportunity to stand in front of a customer and deliver your message, if you've done all the brand work and all the positioning and all of the great messaging around your brand, and you can get that story down to the person at the front line, and they can tell that story confidently and consistently, they're going to win deals a larger percentage of the time. It's not a hard equation. So a lot of times what we find is the organizations that we're talking to, they fundamentally have a problem or a belief that they should be converting a higher percentage of interactions or conversations than they are. We've seen it now. We do work in the banking space as well. I think we're going to have a great offline conversation, Ron, about talking shop about what you do and what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've seen it in the banking space. We've seen it in the luxury goods space. We've seen it in the consumer product, consumer manufactured goods space. These organizations who have great products, great ideas, great new services, all these new things that they bring to market, but the story doesn't get told at the front lines. And the reality is, when you're talking about conversion, 1%, 2% more conversion for most of these companies is a lot of money. And that drives down their cost to acquire. It improves the overall effectiveness of their marketing spend. So at the end of the day, we're talking to people who believe that their conversion can and should be higher.
Yeah, absolutely. And today, Chris Wallace, co-founder and president of InnerView, is our guest today. You can connect with them at InnerView. That's InnerView Group.com. Chris, let's switch gears just a little bit with me. I've heard this term come up in some different conversations. I was wondering if you could maybe clarify it for me. The term of brand dilution. Can you educate us on what that is and how that affects businesses?
Yeah, I mean, brand dilution is pretty simple. Organizations spend a lot, like we talked about, to market their products and services. And a lot of the companies we work with are on the consumer side. So these are companies that are spending, in some cases, hundreds of millions. Our biggest client spends hundreds of millions of dollars on advertising. And they're spending all this money on advertising, and they tell one story directly to the customer. Then when the customer says, okay, I like what you're saying, I like the draw, I like the hook that you're telling me, and then they show up to engage with the company. It could be online, it could be over the phone, it could be in a retail store, whatever that touch point is. When the customer shows up to engage, what they hear is something very different than what they heard through the advertising or through the marketing. That's the dilution that we're talking about. The lack of consistency, the degradation of that story. People will often say it's like a game of telephone. And that's really what it is, where, a whisper down the lane, where the person at corporate says, well, we can advertise this and blast it out to our customers. And the customers like what we're saying. We work with a national pest control company that is in the midst of a repositioning campaign, and they push out all this advertising, and it's resonating with customers. And then when one of their technicians shows up, or one of their customer service reps answers the phone, there's a big disconnect between what the brand promised and what the person is experiencing. That's the dilution that we're talking about. And that's what we spend a lot of time and effort to study, is really how bad of a problem is that.
Yeah. And with that, being a problem, Chris, one of the questions that I have is, why do you feel customers struggle so much to tell that consistent brand story? So you talked about a lot of the issues centers around the inconsistencies, right? And the inconsistencies are generally, I guess, tied to the impairment of communication, or the impairment of information flowing from the visionary level at the CEO, kind of executive VP level through middle management and then down to the frontline teams. So, why do you think that's such a struggle to be able to make that consistent, particularly in today's environment where you've got all the communication? It's not like you got to send memos, right? I mean, you've got, you've got emails, you've got all kinds of different ways to meet remotely. So we've got all this technology that allows us to communicate much more efficiently and at a much lower cost. So why, with all of that, is it become, I guess, harder for companies to tell that consistent brand story?
You just told the story of why it's harder, and I will tell you why. What we're finding is the efficiency of the communication and the speed at which organizations, companies are bringing new things to market. The banking sector is a great example.
Yeah.
Companies are trying to diversify their revenue as much as they possibly can. They don't want to be one single commodity product. They want to have a whole suite of services and products. There's the phrase in banking we hear all the time is share of wallet, right? They want to be driving more of that share of wallet with their customers.
Right.
And because they're bringing so many things to market and their communications are efficient, their methods of getting information out to their people are so efficient, they're able to push it out so fast, so frequently, in such huge volumes that what we're finding is the speed and the volume of information is burying people at the front lines. They're not able to keep it straight.
Yeah.
And again, I think the banking sector is a great example. You think about all the different products and services that your typical relationship banker in a branch is able to offer.
Right.
And it's such an extensive product suite, and they keep launching more, and then they add new promotions, and they change the price, and they do a quarterly promotion. And all these messages are changing so fast, and they're pushing it out through these efficient means. But what ends up happening is at some point, efficient information becomes noise. If it's coming at you so fast, so frequently, and in such huge volumes, you start to tune it out. So one of the things that we do with the companies that we work with is look for ways to go around that noise. And in some cases, we're going back to much less efficient, and in some cases, less cost-effective ways of getting the message out. But what we're finding is by changing the way that people see and consume the information, we're able to get their attention again.
Yeah, and you mentioned in terms of banking, and that's, like I said, that's right up my alley. I'll tell you where I get brought in is from the culture standpoint, and so it's a lot of what you're tying it to, Chris. When I get brought in or hired, it centers around they're wanting to level up the culture. They've recognized what you recognize and what we've been stating here on the show. But they also recognize particularly some of the community banks. So when I'm mentioning, banks that are under, $5 billion in assets. So anywhere from, say, $150 million to $5 billion in assets. What they end up finding out is we've got to be able to keep up with the large players, the Bank of Americas, the Wells Fargos, and all that, who can operate efficiently with technology, with mobile apps and with the number of branch locations and blah, blah, blah. But when I come in, it's the culture of what you're saying is they cascade so much information down. And again, I'm 17 years as a banker, and so I groomed through the retail bank. And so I started as a teller, went through management trainee, managed my first branch at 24, went all the way up to the executive level where I had 10 branches and 96 employees, including a 20-seat call center. And what tends to happen is, there's not this culture of training and development that exists. And I think that's a big thing that's happened, Chris, over the last, say 30 years, is companies have moved out of that space of really doing training. And the banking industry is a great one to talk about with this because it's very homogenous. And so last 30 years is all they've tried to do is just pluck each other's talent. And so the problem with that is when you're moving one side of the engine so fast, because you're bringing in new products, like you say, you're repricing CDs every quarter, you're coming in with new products on this, new products with that, and you're asking your $25,000 to $45,000 a year employee, in the case of the banking industry, to process 150 different combinations with every customer that walks in the door. And so, what you're saying is exactly spot on, is that it's kind of tying to that culture of companies recognize that at the end of the day, we've got to have this frontline staff, that's really bought in, and we've got to somewhat kind of dead some of their noise in some senses. And so when you're defining brand dilution for us, I'm kind of taking away that it's kind of, taking away a little bit of the efficiency of the way things are going out, to slow that part of the engine down just enough so that the frontline employee can really keep up. And actually be able to deliver. So it kind of reminds me of, how Chick-fil-A blew up. They didn't blow up by selling you everything that they could make a chicken out of, right? They basically had a menu that says, here's what we do. We sell nuggets, we sell sandwiches, we might sell a chicken salad, but that's it. And everything's based off of that. It's not, we don't have 200 different chicken products with chicken fries and chicken nachos and chicken blah, 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 right? And so I see companies starting to do that. And so I appreciate that explanation. Do you see companies buying into that brand dilution?
We do. We think the phrase I always use, Ron, is we're early to the party, but we're at the right party. We really see organizations recognizing that brand is starting to, that the phrase brand, and some people, it might give them a little, a little bit of a nervous tick because people don't necessarily know exactly what the word brand means. But we're seeing brand encompass a lot more than just advertising and marketing.
Right.
It's getting out into the mission, vision, values of an organization, really into their culture and DNA. And you look at the brands that do this so well. You look at the Southwest. You look at the Patagonias. Companies like that where brand is just it literally is their DNA.
Right.
And other organizations that struggle to capture that, they're realizing that if they don't, and there's one phrase that we haven't really mentioned that I think is so critical to bring up here, and I see it on your website, and that's customer experience.
Yes.
These organizations, you think about the products and services that we're talking about, whether it's banking or consumer products, you can get the same product or the same service or similar quality, similar price somewhere else. You always have another option.
Right.
And when we think about what's going to differentiate these companies going forward, it is how well your people and your experience lives up to the promise that you are making.
Right.
If it lives up to the promise more times than your competitors, you brought up Chick-fil-A is a great example. Chick-fil-A delivers an experience that connects with people. And you can get a chicken sandwich or nuggets or a shake just about anywhere.
Right.
The fact that you go there and they exceed your expectations for that experience, that is their currency. That's what they're not saying we have the best chicken sandwich. They're saying you're going to be happy when you leave a Chick-fil-A. And that's true more times than not. So that's how they're winning. They're winning on experience. And I think that when you think about brand dilution, the biggest problem, if your message to the customer is not matching up with the experience, it's going to be the way the customer judges you. And they judge you on your experience. And if you hear, we have a client who told us recently, we have to stop having our customers train our call center agents on the products. Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
The customer sees the advertisement. They call in to ask about something, and then they're the ones telling the agent more about the product than they knew before.
Right.
That's a real problem. That is a degraded experience, and that's what brands are going to lose.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also because, not only does the process move fast, Chris, on the company's end, but the way they deliver to the, to the customer is just as fast as the way they deliver it internal to the employee. And so sometimes the customer can pick things up, really quick, and they can begin acting on that information really quick. And it creates that dichotomy of, and I've seen this. I used to train call centers even up in Detroit, where I would come in and the spigot gets turned on, and now calls are routing in, and people are sitting there with information in front of them and sitting on their couch or at their desk, and the agent doesn't even know really what the hell's going on, and now it creates, like you say, that customer experience is impacted, and like you say, the alternatives are all over the place. And so really what you and I are speaking to is culture. And I know that's a broad term, but, I think folks like you and I, your team, my team, we're going into these organizations and helping them get a realistic kind of view and opinion of, their culture and how it cascades. And some of this is different because I bet you if you go back 100 years ago and you ask Henry Ford, who was probably walking the plant, the Ford plant, and he lived amongst his employees, and so he could cascade information down, and then he was on the front line. At a lot of these banks, the CEO doesn't even know how many damn branches he's got in some cases if it's not a marketing person telling him, right? And ask a lot of these CEOs the last time they visited a lot of their branches. And again, we're just using banking as the example, but I come across banks that, not so much the smaller ones, but these mid-size and then really large super regionals, the CEO's never been to some of the branches. Never see. So, and not just the CEO, the executive team has never visited. Or when they do, they make it such a corporate thing, Chris, that they, I remember I was at a bank, I won't name it, but you'll find this funny. The CEO was going to come in town. They wanted to do everything, including changing the pH balance in the damn soil. They came out, wow. Whoever knows how much money they spent, they came and changed the soil at the headquarters in this market here. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. The CEO was coming weeks ahead of time. They painted, they changed the soil, they switched out TV. I mean, they did everything just for this guy to show up for maybe 20, 30 minutes, shake some hands, take some pictures, and just kind of go. And you're thinking, I bet you they had to have spent, I don't know, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 on this guy's visit, just sprucing up stuff for this guy, because he comes once in a millennium, right? And so, but it tells you the disconnect, right, to what we're speaking. That's the reason I bring up that example, is because it's a disconnect between companies realizing now that, you've got to have some kind of connectivity to what's going on the front line. Otherwise, what are we doing here? Why are we spending millions of dollars on, marketing and advertising campaigns, like you say, only to not deliver? So I'm glad you're in this space, my man, and that you're helping bridge this gap.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So Chris, as you shared a lot of great nuggets today and that sort of thing. What are maybe 2 or 3 best practices? We've got an audience here. We've got people that are listening, people that are traveling, people that are in gyms, people coming home from sales calls, people who took the day off, and some are business owners, some are working 9 to 5. They're in cubicles, they're in offices. What would you say? There are 2 or 3 best practices in business that they can take away from and implement.
Well, the first thing, I don't think that it doesn't matter how big or small your organization is. Really gaining an understanding of what your story is critically important. And I've learned this the hard way. InnerView is really my 3rd chance at building a business. I sold a business previously, then tried to help build the business that I sold it to, and ended up starting InnerView really to take what I learned over the years and really hone the story and hone the positioning of it. So I think that getting your story straight, it's got to start from the top. You've got to know what you want to say. You've got to know how to deliver it, and you've got to be able to, like you said, cascade is the right word. You've got to be able to cascade that down. So you've got to get it straight first. So putting in the time to really understand what your story is, what your differentiators are, what your positioning is critically important. If you can't have a consistent story, whether you're big or small, especially if you're small, to be honest, your story has to be consistent, it has to be crisp, it has to be on point. So that would be number 1. Is putting time into your really, we're talking about your value proposition. Making sure you truly understand what your value proposition is, and you and the other people on your team can deliver. So that would be the first. The second I would say is seek a lot of feedback. And what I mean by that is when you're crafting a story, again, large or small organization, gathering input and feedback from people throughout the organization is really important. What we do at InnerView, we have a trademark process and tool called the brand transfer score. what the brand transfer score does is we take a company's brand, their brand promise or a product, and we can assess the viewpoint of the corporate team and then compare it to the viewpoint of the frontline team. So think of it as like internal market research, right? Just as you'd ask a customer what they think of something, we ask the frontline teams what they think of something. Then we do a statistical comparison of what they say compared to what the corporate team says, and we tell them statistically how misaligned they are.
Oh.
To what degree do they see it differently than the people back at corporate?
I love that.
And the principle there is you've got to ask people what they think. You've got to involve people in the process. If you're not looking for feedback, the biggest challenge most organizations have is they assume. One of my favorite stories is I one time had a large consumer company, $5 billion public company. I had the head of learning and development for the organization say, why would we tap into our people for their ideas? Why don't we just tell them what to do and have them go do it? This is the head of learning and development. And my answer to that was, how do you know you're right?
Right, exactly.
How do you know you have the right answer? So gathering that feedback from others in the organization as part of the process of getting your story straight is going to do two things. One, it's going to make sure your story's better because you're going to mix some ingredients into that story that are going to make it richer, more interesting, more compelling. And
Right.
then the second thing is you're going to drive the engagement level of those people you're asking way up. If they're involved in the process and they feel like they've helped to shape the story, their engagement level goes way up. Their ownership of telling that story goes way up. So, it really, the two biggest pieces of feedback are make sure you hone your story and make sure you've got a really tight story to tell. And as part of that process, gathering feedback from a lot of people along the way, so you can learn a lot of different perspectives and help get the story right.
Yeah, exactly. And I was laughing earlier, Chris, because I've heard that. So I've been, as someone, and again, using banking as an example for this, as someone who's been, in some cases, one of the only people advocates in the room amongst executives. What you stated earlier is not uncommon at all. And, part of the reason I started my business, quite frankly, was because I was vocal in speaking up against that. You'll be surprised. Well, at least NYB, you'll be surprised. Probably not Chris. He's probably heard it all. But you'll be surprised at what's said in some of these boardrooms as it relates to people and the processes around people. Chris is exactly right. You'll have executives that'll literally will ask that question. Why do we want to get feedback from, our employees, particularly our frontline employees? Because again, there's a gap, and I kind of gave an example of Henry Ford earlier that, may be somewhat unique and it's 1,000 years ago, but it rings true that corporate executives used to be much closer to people. They used to be a little closer to them in salary, a little closer to them in where they lived and how they interacted. At these banks, the CEO has almost literally no chance of ever running into his full-time teller at some branch anywhere in any part of either of their lives. And so I think that helps create some of the disconnect that Chris and I are talking about. And quite frankly, as a best practice, what Chris is saying is be careful of that. Even while you're small and nimble, MYB, make sure that if you're the only employee in your company, or whether you've got 10 or 15 or 20, make sure that you're getting their opinion because it can go a long way. But Chris, I think you had something to add to that.
I was just going to say the magic happens here when organizations, regardless of size, decide to start looking at their people as an audience to be won over and to be sold to, as opposed to an audience to be forced into compliance. And the old school way is to tell them what to do and expect them to go do it. And in our economy, in this day and age, especially with the millennial set and different generations coming up, they don't want to be told what to do. So involving them in the process and treating them as almost like a segment of your marketing strategy of people that you need to convince how great you are and how good your brand is for your customers, that's really where the magic happens. When organizations flip that switch from telling people what to do to focusing on convincing them, that's where we see real results and breakthrough opportunities.
Yeah, most definitely. So today's guest, Chris Wallace, co-founder and president of InnerView. Chris, for those that may be interested in connecting with you further, how can they do so?
Throughout website, InnerViewGroup.com, and again, as Ron mentioned, it's INNERVIEW, not interview, like going for a job, but looking inside, interview. I'm cwallace at InnerViewGroup.com, so if anybody wants to reach out, you can also find me on LinkedIn. In Philadelphia, Christopher Wallace is not an uncommon name, so if you're looking for me on LinkedIn, look for Philadelphia. And
Right.
I'm happy to connect with any of your listeners or anybody in the NYC community.
Yep, and I want to make sure too. I put it in the show notes, but I want to make sure too that people knew that you weren't the rapper Chris Wallace. Biggie Smalls come back to life.
Notorious. Biggie.
Yeah, right. So you wasn't the notorious one, and we have. There's a guy that used to be a general manager. I think he's still with the Grizzlies, the Memphis Grizzlies NBA team. That's somewhat notorious here in town. Whose name is Chris Wallace. So.
I had a chance to meet him once, Ron.
Did you? Okay, yeah.
Which was a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's a pretty open guy. I've had a chance to meet him too, and he spent some time in Boston. Matter of fact, he was the kind of the architect of your last NBA championship team with bringing Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen and that whole crew to Boston. So anyway. Listen, Chris, thank you so much, man, for taking time to join me. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the insight. I love to be able to connect with you. I think you and I are a lot in the same spaces, although, I focus in from an industry standpoint on banking. Obviously you do that and then much more. So I'd love to be able to connect with you offline, man, and, best wishes personally and professionally to you. And, again, thank you again for taking time out. You're a busy guy, man, so I appreciate you doing it.
Of course, thanks for the opportunity, Ron. I really do appreciate it, and to your listeners as well.
Yep, excellent. Thanks so much, Chris. We'll talk soon, man.
Okay.
All right, bye-bye. So, again, that was Chris Wallace joining us. And I'm, thankful that he was able to do so on today. First, I wasn't sure if he was going to even be able to make it or not. Just given that his schedule was so hectic. And one thing we didn't mention on the podcast was Chris's contributions to Forbes and to Inc. and some of those other publications, Harvard Business Review and that sort of thing. But so we appreciate Chris doing that. Make sure you connect with him if you have some additional questions, something about some of the insight that was shared. You can definitely do that. And again, his contact information is in the show notes. All right, let's get to Ron's rundown. All right, folks, we're here. Ron's rundown today. I've got several things to jump into. Again, shout out to everybody that's on Facebook. Marcus Young, what's going on? Chef Fran, what's up? Dominic Lawson, we've already shouted you out, my man, with Startup Life. Congratulations again on the Target deal, my brother. Thank you so much, man, and appreciate what you're doing out here to help us all level up, man, and inspire us all. Kimberly Deal, what's going on? Steve, Karunda, what's up, Sor? Crystal, what's up? Shirley, Reginald, what's going on? Adam, John, DeMario, what's up? Eric, what's up? Shay Brown, what's going on? Skills and Heels. L, what's going on, my brother? Rod Selman, what's up, man? Erica, how you doing? Frank, what's up? Jimmy, Kaylin, The Law, Lawrence Thompson, what's up, brother? How you doing? Thank y'all all for joining on. I want to shout y'all out. Today on Run's Rundown, let's go through. LinkedIn came out with a list of its top 50 startups. And I'm not going to read all of them to you because I want you to look at it for yourself and read it for yourself. But it spoke to the top startups from a work standpoint. So it's top startups to work for. So I just want to mention a couple to you. The number one startup was a company called Snowflake, which is a computer software company. They've got over 1,000 employees, and they're based in San Mateo, California. They were founded in 2012, and they do a lot of cloud computing, analytics, things like that. But they are rated as the number one startup, according to LinkedIn. They grew revenue by 257%. Damn, 257% since they started, which is phenomenal. And they have a valuation of close to $4 billion. So, and that growth isn't really slowing down. They now have over 85 jobs open. So when you check out their job posting, if anybody's interested in doing anything out in California, or my California peeps, if you're interested in getting involved with a startup, Snowflake is one that's in your area, and they've got 85 positions open right now today. One that's number 4 that you probably are definitely familiar with is DoorDash. DoorDash came number 4 on their list. They've got a head count of a little over 1,700 people. They're headquartered in San Francisco. They were founded in 2013. And, of course, they are they're doing extremely well. They've got great, their numbers are up. They've got great revenue sharing. They're in that space kind of along with Uber Eats and that sort of thing from a food delivery standpoint. But, yeah, I mean, they're on the rise too. So make sure that you check out DoorDash. And just check out the list. It's on LinkedIn. I know how y'all are about LinkedIn, some of y'all. But some of y'all love Snapchat and Instagram probably a little better. Some of that may be your type of business, but some of you may be finding that you need to spend a little bit more time on some of this other stuff than some of the personal stuff. But that's just, that's my brief soapbox on that. But check out the list. It's on LinkedIn. You can find it at themybpodcast.com. It's posted there, so you can check out the full entire list. Definitely shout out to those that are affected, that have been in the pathway of Hurricane Dorian, those that are down in the Bahamas, coming up to the east coast of Florida, to Georgia, South Carolina. I think it's now off the coast of North Carolina and maybe heading back out to sea, and it keeps weakening and strengthening. So I know there have been some reported deaths, and some of you that are in business or have business interest that are there on that southern Atlantic coast and that sort of thing. Definitely shout outs to you, and hope that things, as they will, they'll rebound, and there'll be aid that'll go to that area and that sort of thing. Some of you that are in real estate may have property down in that area, so definitely make sure that you do what you have to do, and hopefully that you and any family that you have has been safe and not having to experience many, if any, obstacles. So, something else to jump into. The NFL started this week. Last night, the Packers beat the Bears. No surprise there, right, Shay Brown? No surprise that the Packers beat the Bears. Wasn't the best game to watch. Neither offense was that great. But the Packers defense, the Bears defense wasn't bad either, but the Packers defense was really good. And, of course, you're going into week 1 for many other teams as you get towards Sunday. So it'll be interesting to see how the NFL season kicks off. You got the business of Antonio Brown. I've been there. I've seen enough personalities just in my short time. I talk like I'm 60-something years old. I ain't but 38. But playing ball for the time that I played ball, I've seen plenty of personalities. So this one's nothing new. It's just that as time progresses, we've got more mediums to consume information. So what Antonio Brown is doing is nothing different than what Deion Sanders did 20, 25 years ago, or Michael Irvin, or Andre Rison, or any of those guys. The difference is that people can post about it. There's many more Stephen A. Smiths and Max Kellermans and those kind of folks around talking about sports all day long that you didn't have in, say, 1995, where you only really had Sports Center and the local sports guy. That's it, and then Sports Illustrated, and that's really all you had. That was before the internet, before Instagram, before Twitter, and all that. So none of this is even new. So it's even funny when some of those guys now that are in their 50s and they come in talking about how Antonio Brown's acting. And, disregarding some of their own escapades that they had with the NFL. But it is what it is. So shout out to Antonio Brown. But he's got to be careful because he doesn't want to mess the money up trying to be a clown. And I think Shay Brown made a good point earlier on one of her posts that it may be a situation where he doesn't really care to play football. He likes the aura that playing football brings as a professional football player, but he may be kind of over actually playing the game. Maybe. I don't know. Sometimes securing the bag can do that for you in terms of your passion. But I don't know. I don't know Antonio. Antonio, if he happens to be listening to this podcast or y'all share this podcast with him, look forward to seeing him on the field, particularly for Raiders fans, and wish him the best on a good season and his team and the best for him personally for his family. So retailers. So you had Walmart, you had I think CVS, Walgreens. These retailers now are starting to pull away from letting you carry guns, and retailers asking customers, why the hell are they asking people? You just tell people don't bring it in, but whatever. So the pressure from some of these mass shootings is starting to weigh in on the Walmarts of the world, and they're asking people to not openly carry or really carry at all into their stores. Time will remain if that makes a difference or not. It's probably a quick step that everybody can do. But obviously there's people on the NRA side, the National Rifle Association side, that would take issue with, and they have taken issue with, the retailers backing out of selling firearms and allowing people to openly carry coming into the store. So whatever, man. It's more to come on that. There's many other layers to helping to resolve the mindset of violence in this country. But maybe one of you will start we're talking about the top startups. Maybe some of you have an idea on a business, or maybe you can expand the product set that can really help with that problem. Because just remember, business is about identifying problems, particularly ones that are reoccurring, that give people pain points, and then developing a process in which those pain points are either eliminated or mitigated. And people are willing to pay to have them eliminated or mitigated. So that's what helps create the business opportunity. So make sure that if that's something that you're interested in, make sure you look to do that. So anyway, we've had a great show. Thank you so much again to Chris Wallace for joining on today. Thank you for all of you for joining today and being so active. I didn't even shout out everybody on Spreaker.com, but thank y'all so much. Everybody on Facebook.com. Sarah, what's going on? Anthony, how you doing, man? What's up? Marcus, how you doing, man? What's going on? Marcus Young, what's up, boy? So man, thank y'all so much for joining. Listen, like and share the show. You can find us anywhere that you consume your podcast content, as well as the mybpodcast.com. Don't forget about onabinge.com. Check out all the shows that are there. And we're going to be back next week for episode 108. God, we're just going to keep moving this thing along. I've got great guests coming, local and national. Let me say this about guests. When we have guests here on the Minding Your Business podcast, the information and best practices that are shared are designed to help us all. And it doesn't matter the credentials or the background or where somebody is from. We've had people from all over the world on this show. But the level of engagement doesn't matter, whether you're local here in Memphis, Tennessee, whether you're anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world. We look for the best practices, and I hope that you get value from the best practices. But from my standpoint, I don't stack rank any of that. They're all important to me, and I look forward to every single episode of the Minding Your Business podcast, because it's a great opportunity and privilege to be able to share this with you. And I told you my story of when I was a kid, how no one would have ever thought I'd be here, considering what was said about me starting out life. So just like all of you, overcoming obstacles all the time, making mistakes, but taking shots. And so I hope that you do that as we're quickly heading towards the end of the third quarter, getting to the fourth quarter of the year. I hope that you really get in the gear, really get focused, and look to finish the year strong. So entrepreneurship, real estate, trending news, there's no business like minding your own. I'm your host, Champ Ron. This has been episode number 107 of the Minding Your Business podcast. Again, thank y'all so much. Have a great weekend. Just be your best. Tell somebody that you love them. End beefs. Call people. Their phone works, your phone works. Y'all both paying bills on cell phones. Pick up the phone, dial a number, call somebody you haven't spoken to in a while, and let's just be great out here. Be your very best self. All right? Champ Ron.